Quiet quitting. It's a term picking up traction online and has some asking if the next generation of workers are lazy or if there's more to the story.
Well, let's find out. Queen City News Chief Business Correspondent Taylor Young breaks down what it means and if Charlotte's workforce is on board with it.
Work hard and you'll succeed. It's a phrase we're all taught from a very young age.
You have to do your part and then just keep working for it until the opportunity comes in, and then they snatch it.
For workers in Charlotte, that could be putting in extra hours, shorter lunch breaks, and maybe even a weekend behind a computer.
Simply put, like, if you're just doing the bare minimum, you're going to make the bare minimum.
But a new phenomenon is telling some the bare minimum might just be enough. It's a newly coined phrase, quiet quitting.
It's just such a hot topic right now.
So what is quiet quitting? It does not mean that a worker is actually quitting their job. Instead, they're refusing to go above and beyond. Showing up, doing your job, and nothing more.
Giving it maybe your all while you're in the office, but not signing up for that extra work or, working nights and weekends. It's more about setting boundaries.
Workforce consultants say, like the Great Resignation, quiet quitting is a workforce trend that picked up speed during the pandemic. According to a recent survey of 1,000 workers in the U.S., 21% say they only do the bare minimum.
You should pay people what they're worth. If you want them to go above and beyond, pay them to go above and beyond.
Consultants say employers shouldn't be too concerned by quiet quitting as long as the job gets done, and any added expectations could need some incentives.
Well, employers need to understand what the reality is. Are people disengaged and coasting, or are they quiet quitting? Are there some jobs actually where quiet quitting, so to speak, or coming in and doing well and doing, but that's enough?
Reporting in Uptown, Taylor Young, Queen City News.
Hey, thanks for checking out West Church Online. Whether you are watching live stream or watching on demand, we are grateful that you have taken a few moments out of the busyness of life to see what we're all about and what we're talking about right now. Today, we are beginning the first of a three-part message series called I'm Fine. In our culture and in our world, we're taught to say, I'm fine. But as you can see, the image on the screen, this nice little skeleton giving the hang ten like it's all good sign with a hole in his head. And lots of times that's what we feel like we say we're fine, but there's really just a big hole in our lives. And we face in today's world this idea of burnout more than any other time in history. The numbers of people that are quitting their jobs completely because of burnout is at an all-time high. And there's this new phrase that if you just saw the video, or we'll put the link to the video in the notes underneath our YouTube link, quiet quitting is a real thing. So today we're going to talk about burnout. We're going to talk about why we get burned out. I'm going to share with you an example of a famous person in Hebrew scripture. His name was Elijah. He suffered burnout, and so we're going to look at his life and his story in detail and see how we can relate to that. And today we won't solve the problem of burnout. We're going to talk about why we get burned out. And over the next 2 weeks, we will talk about how do we address it and how do we work through it. If you are new to the West community, we are really grateful that you have stumbled upon us. We'd like to know that you have checked out this message. So if you would text the word welcome to 704-343-8955. 704-343-8955. If you text the word welcome, we have a free gift for you, and then you can choose whether or not you opt in to hearing more from us. We're excited to talk about burnout, something we all face together, and I look forward to sharing with you this morning.
I have loved you from the start. I have seen your hurting heart. and you feel so lonely, but you keep on hiding, 'cause you feel so guilty for what you've done. But there's no distance too far that I can't reach you. There's no place that's so dark that I can't find you. Anywhere that you are, and if you need proof, take a look at these scars. Know I love you. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter what you've done. You were never, never too far gone. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. You have run down every road, and you've lost your way back home. And you feel so dirty, you know that you're unworthy, feeling undeserving of any love. But there's no distance too far that I can't reach you. There's no place that's so dark that I can't find you. Anywhere that you are, and if you need proof, take a look at these scars. Know I love you. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter what you've done. You were never, never too far gone. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh. You will never outrun my love, my love, my love. You will never outrun my love, my love, my love. You will never outrun my love, my love, my love. You will never outrun my love, my love. There's no distance too far that I can't reach you. There's no place that's so dark that I can't find you. Anywhere that you are, and if you need proof, take a look at these scars. I know I love you. Doesn't matter, doesn't matter, doesn't matter what you've done. You were never, never too far gone. Oh, 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 never too far gone. Oh, 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 never too far gone. Oh, 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 oh. Oh, 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 oh.
So this morning, I want us to think for a few minutes about where we are on the burnout scale. And I want us to be honest with ourselves. Are we burned out or not? And guess what? You don't have to work in corporate America to be burned out. You can work at home as a caregiver, as a parent to a parent, or as a parent to children. You can be in a job situation and be burned out. You can be a friend and not have any children and just be a presence in people's lives and be burned out. There are so many different ways and experiences that lead to our burnout. I want us to think about how quick we are to react. Like, are you quick to get angry? Are you quick to give up? Are you quick to think like, oh, the whole world is against me? Or why does this always have to happen to me? Why do I always get the short end of the stick? Those things are examples of burnout. And what burnout is it is a literal condition that happens to us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, all four of those things, after we go through repeated stress for a prolonged period of time. It doesn't just happen in our work, it can happen in any element of our lives. It is a very real thing, and it's something that we have to figure out. There are three components that cause us to be burned out, and they all start with F, so that's going to be really easy for us to remember. They are fatigue, fear, and frustration. Fatigue, fear, and frustration. And when we experience those things over and over and over again, they add up to our being burned out. It was 4 years ago, actually, to this period of time. Today is West's 12th birthday. And, for a long time, we would have these, big parties and celebrations, but at some point, we're not new anymore. So celebrating that we've survived and become a legit church, it just feels pretty disingenuous. And on today, when we remember a day that has been monumental in our history as a nation and society on 9/11, it just didn't seem like we needed to have a big to-do around West and around our birthday. But it's ironic, as we were preparing for this message, and I'd asked some of our leaders, I'm like, what's one topic you think we need to hear about this fall? And their first answer back was burnout. I feel like I am stretched so thin, and I just don't know how to get it all done. And I feel like I'm not doing anything well, and I feel like I'm doing a disservice to everyone. Could we talk about burnout? I'm like, sure, that's fine. And there are so many examples in Scripture of burnout. So it was a great way to tie in Scripture and faith lessons to our everyday lives. The irony of it was, though, that as I was doing research and reading books about burnout and hearing from other pastors and other leaders, business leaders that have experienced it and come back from it, I remembered, oh my gosh, okay, it was 4 years ago. And we were celebrating our birthday as a church. I think that day I dressed up like a mermaid because we were going to talk about our discipleship process. And we were going to talk about that being a part of a faith community is like a beach scene. And that, sometimes we come to it and we're on the tip of the water where the water comes up and we just want to barely dip our toes into it. Other times, we just want to watch from afar. We want to stand back and look at what's happening. Other times we want to swim in the water. We want to, try out church or faith, waist deep. And then there are other times in our journey and in our stations in life that we want to be all in, and we're like scuba divers, and we're way down in the deep. So we had planned this message series on the beach scene. And we started off that Sunday with me dressed like a mermaid, and then we had this Jack in the Box thing the next week, and it was fun after fun after fun, and I'll never forget, it was the fourth message in that series. It was the second Sunday in October. And after worship was finished at the high school, that was back when we had one service, and we live streamed that service at the high school. I'd made it through the message, and I walked off the stage, and I thought, I'm finished. I don't think I'll ever preach again. I was exhausted. I had no idea how much the last 12 years, or back then 8 years, had taken a toll on me emotionally and physically, and not just the job. I mean, launching a church it seemed pretty impossible. We had a great team of leaders, but none of us really knew what we were doing, and we launched, and then we had to go a different direction, and it was intense. And then once we chartered and we stated our core values that all really does mean all and we welcome all people, we lost 85 people. And of course they were the biggest givers. And so that was stress. In the middle of all that, I was trying to finish a doctorate degree because I needed some religious degree. I had 2 other degrees, but they weren't in theology. And for my own mental well-being, I felt like I needed to actually finish something that would be related to my field of work. And then I was trying to be a mom to, they were in elementary school when we started West. One was in middle, one was in elementary. So I was trying to be a mom and go to soccer games and different kinds of competitions. I was trying to be a wife. I was trying to be a friend. And I was trying to get ordained in the United Methodist Church, which is a process within itself. A process I'm grateful for because, like, there's a lot of steps that go into being a pastor. You can't just walk in off the street and go, oh, I think I want to preach for a while. It's actually a pretty stringent process. But all that coupled with trying to be a pastor and not really knowing how, and not knowing how to launch a church, and trying to figure it out as we went, and trying to grow and staff and just all these things, and making bad decisions and failing, you know, over and over again. But our mantra is always, we're going to fail, but we're going to fail fast and fix it. You know, it just had taken its toll. In the middle of all that, in my personal life, I didn't realize that it was coming to a head. And then my father, who was 90, I'm an only child, he had started, you know, like giving away all of his life, actually. He was a victim of senior adult fraud and scams, and he gave away over $250,000 to people over a 3-year time span. So I had to take him to court for guardianship. I mean, like, in this 8 years of my life, there was just a lot of crap. And that Sunday, I was done. Little did I know that my spouse at the time, that Friday night, I was trying to work on my sermon because I'd been out of town on a work trip that whole week, and I hadn't had time to finish the message. And I was sitting there, and I just was crying. I'm a crier anyway. I cry if I'm happy, sad, mad, glad. Any emotion causes me to have tears. But that night, I was just so frustrated. And I'm just like, I don't know how to do this anymore. And unbeknownst to me, one of a very kind thing that he did is that he approached the leadership team on my behalf. And he said, look, I'm worried about her. I think she's burnt out. That Sunday when I walked off the stage, and in my mind I thought, I just think I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. I'm going to call Amy Coles, and I'm going to do what I see so many of my colleagues doing right now, and just saying, I just need a minute, maybe several minutes. I walked out in the commons area at the high school, and we have hospitality time out there, like some snacks and just time for people to chit-chat if they desire. And a couple of the founding members of West were standing there, and they said, how are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine. I said, glad today's done. And they said, no, really. How are you? I said, you want the truth? They said, well, yeah, we wouldn't have asked if we didn't want to know. And I said, I'm not fine. I am so tired. And I just don't know that I can do this anymore. Now, in the Methodist Church, there's a lot of rules by this thing called the Book of Discipline that we adhere to. We try to adhere to. And so there's this thing about you don't meet without the pastor's knowledge, without advance notice, without the pastor's boss there. It's to keep a coup from happening or mutiny happening, and that would never happen at West, but it sadly does happen in other churches and other organizations within our denomination. But they had a meeting without me, and they said, we've got to find a way to give her a break. So that story is very similar to what we're going to see in Scripture in just a second. But I don't think that story is isolated only to me. We have lived through, I think, although I still am not sure it's finished. I was in Philadelphia for a few days this past week, and everyone had on masks. Like, I have stopped wearing a mask, and so I don't know if there's a bigger COVID outbreak up there again or what, but we have lived through a pandemic. And in that pandemic, everything changed. And we're on the other side of that, and we're trying to figure out what life is like. And I think we don't give ourselves enough space and enough room to recognize the toll that all of that took on all of us. Trying to decide how to stay healthy, how to be healthy, and not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Like, we are built, we are created for community. And so we had to find new ways to do that within our own lives. And families would go years without seeing each other. Weddings that were supposed to happen didn't happen. They got postponed. Celebration of life or funeral services were not allowed to be had. People had to grieve and mourn the loss of loved ones and their death without even being by their side. It was an impossible time. And guess what? Like, once we reopened, it's like, full steam ahead. And we find ourselves trying to find our footing and find our best way forward. And because we are a resilient culture and society and determined and driven, we forget of the ramifications of the past and the things that we've lived through. Remember, I said there are three things that contribute, well, there's a lot of things that contribute to burnout, but three main things we're looking at today: fatigue, fear, and frustration. Over the past 3 to 4 years, how many times have you felt afraid? Afraid for your well-being, afraid of the unknown, afraid of your financial security. How many times have you felt afraid? And how many times have you experienced fatigue? One thing that's interesting is that when we exercise our muscles and we use them over and over and over again, whereas they may become tired, they don't become like spent and fatigued, because when you work a muscle, you're actually, as it tears down, it gets stronger. Tom does these things that I think are just absolutely insane, and they're Ironmen. He does the 70.3 Ironman triathlons, and so he has this rigorous training schedule. And when he first started with the dream of doing triathlons, I really wanted to offer my support, and I'm like, I tell you what, like, when you go train, I'll go to the gym or I'll walk, and I'll match time to time. Then I noticed how much he had to train. And then I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'll match, half to your time. Now I've given up completely, because we're trying to, launch multiple new ministries, and I'm really literally back where I was 12 years ago. Like, we're recreating a church. And it seems like every spare moment needs to be given to West. And I know that that's not healthy, but it's where we are. But I want us to understand, that word fatigue, it's not just being tired, and it's not really even about being tired physically, although that's a component. It's about mental fatigue. Because guess what? What our minds think, our bodies hear. When Tom does these triathlons, he gets to the final part, and it's the run. So you swim a mile and something, and then you bike for 52 miles, and then you have to do a half marathon there at the end. And it's so interesting to watch all the folks approach the finish line. There's just something in them that they dig deep, and usually you can see them coming for a good distance, right? It curves around. And so the one that Tom did in Oregon, it was like a half mile that you could see the runners coming to the finish line. And I mean, there were people that were 18, and then there were folks that were in their late 80s finishing this race. And when they would get close to the finish line, when they could see the finish line, you would notice that something would change in them. They would dig deeper, and they would finish strong. Even though they were spent and exhausted, they all would cross that finish line with purpose and determination. despite being tired, they did not allow themselves to be fatigued because something happens in their mind like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make it. I see the finish line, and I am going to cross that finish line. It's so interesting that when we look at these analogies and we think about our lives and we think about our faith, that one of the fathers of faith, the Apostle Paul, who started out like a really bad guy and killed Christians and persecuted Christians, had his own Jesus resurrection moment on the road to Damascus. He was blinded by the light, and then it changed him, and he wrote a good part of our New Testament scriptures as letters to churches that he founded and to people that followed his teachings, his mentees. He has this one passage, it's just so beautiful. And he says, I have fought the good fight, and I have finished my race, and I am going to claim the prize. He's not talking about a trophy or a Ironman medal or any kind of medal or a certificate that we can put up on our walls. He's talking about this race of life. And Paul had afflictions. We really don't know exactly what it was, but he writes about it over and over again, that there was just this one thing that always was like a thorn in his flesh, as he refers to it, like a chronic problem that was debilitating at times. Yet he never gave in. He was imprisoned. He was almost executed, yet he never quit. He never gave in to his fatigue, even though he was just so tired. It was important to him to finish the race well. We do that by the way that we think. We can control, believe it or not, how tired we feel by the way that we allow our minds to go. If we tell ourselves that we're tired, guess what? We're going to feel tired. But if we tell ourselves that we can do it despite some physical exhaustion or mental fatigue, if we tell ourselves that we can do it, our bodies will hear what we think. And so fear and fatigue and frustration, those three things are very real, but we can combat them. And we can combat our fatigue by being mindful about our mental fatigue. Because guess what? Like, we can be physically tired, but if we don't have the mental stamina anymore to push ourselves from within, that's when burnout happens. Burnout happens when we are mentally fatigued. It happens when we are afraid. We're afraid of what we don't know or what's coming, afraid of pain, afraid of failure. And it comes when we're frustrated, when we feel like we've been giving all that we've got to give and it just is never enough. So I want to read you this story, and we're picking up in Elijah's life, and we're halfway through the exciting part of the story. So back then, during the Hebrew scriptures, Elijah, he was known as a prophet, and a prophet would be the person that would go tell the people who were following God, like what God wanted them to know. Sort of like a preacher, but they would like foretell the future and say, like this is the way we need to go and what we need to do. So Elijah was a very, very well-known and predominant prophet. And he existed in a time where there was the idea that you worship the one true God that revealed God's self to Abraham. And then Abraham started the Israel heritage and the 12 tribes of Israel and all those things. So these folks are a descendant of that. But that was just one way of thinking during that time. There were other world religions that existed during this time, and one of the other gods was known as Baal. And Elijah had been trying to get the people to get off the fence, like either worship God or either worship Baal. But you need to quit saying you're worshiping God, but you really are still, doing all these practices and all these things that are worshiping the false gods, the pagan gods. And so Elijah went up on top of this mountain, and he was going to fight all the other priests and prophets of Baal. He was going to fight 450 men. He was going to lead the charge. And so he goes up on top of the mountain, and we'll talk about what happens and how it happens next week. But what I want you to know today is that he won. He won against 450 other men. And I mean, can you imagine the adrenaline rush that happens? Like, you've been preparing for this battle, and then you have this battle, and it goes really well. What does that look like in our lives? Like we're preparing for something big, like within our families, a big celebration or a big experience. Or if we're in our corporate worlds, we're preparing for a big presentation or trying to procure a new customer or a new deal or get something to happen that has never happened before. And so we do all this time and energy around it, and we lead up to it. Regardless of personal or professional ways that we approach big things, we go into them and we do them. We achieve success. And then it's like, oh, now what? I want you to hear the now what with Elijah. And I want you to see if you can find yourself in his story. So now, one of the folks that also represented Baal was named Ahab. And Ahab and Jezebel were people in power. She was the queen, and so they were the governmental rulers of this time. So Ahab, Jezebel's, right hand, goes up to Jezebel and says to her and tells her everything that Elijah had done, including the massacre of their prophets. So Jezebel, the queen, immediately sent a messenger to Elijah, and she threatens him. The gods are going to get you for this, and I personally am going to get even with you. By this time tomorrow, you are going to be as dead as any one of those prophets that you killed. When Elijah saw how things were, he ran for dear life to Beersheba. It was far into the south of Judah. He left his young servant there, and he went on into the desert another day's journey. He came to a lone broom bush. It was a type of tree. And he collapsed in its shade, wanting in the worst way to be done with it all. He wanted to die. Enough of this, God. Take my life. I'm ready to join my ancestors in the grave. And exhausted, he fell asleep under the lone bush. Suddenly, an angel shook him awake and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and to his surprise, right by his head were a loaf of bread baked on some coals and a jug of water. He ate the meal and went back to sleep. The angel of God came back, shook him awake again, and said, "Get up and eat some more. You have a long journey ahead of you." He got up, ate, drank his fill, and set out. Nourished by that meal, he walked 40 days and nights all the way to the mountain of God, to Horeb. And when he got there, he crawled in to a cave and he went to sleep. Then God spoke to him and said, "So, Elijah, what are you doing here?" And Elijah said, "I've been working my heart out for the God of the angel armies. The people of Israel have abandoned your covenant, destroyed places of worship. They've murdered your prophets, and I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me." And God said, "Go stand on the mountain at attention before God, and God will pass by." fatigue, fear, and frustration. I mean, all the time and energy he had put into getting ready for this big battle. I mean, he's fatigued. He's emotionally and mentally fatigued. It was not just a physical, competition. I mean, the planning and the execution and the working out of relationships. Does that sound like anything we deal with in our lives? Like in everything that we do, we manage our relationships with our family, with our friends, with our colleagues. And that can be draining. People aren't easy. And in today's society, we are polarized and just an angry group of people. I have friends that work in the law profession. I have friends that work in the medical profession, and they'll share with me stories, not any names of people, but just people that call and they're just so angry because things aren't exactly the way that they want them to be. Like, we as a culture and people are frustrated because we are fatigued. Because we've been trying to manage all these things for so long, and we find ourselves at this place. And so, like, after we accomplish our big thing, it's like, okay, now what? And it's like one more thing can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's what we need to be cognizant of. I mean, think about it. Like, Elijah fought 450 priests, killed them, led his people to kill them. He is a man of success. He is a man of courage and bravery. And so he gets a message from Jezebel, the queen, the governmental ruler, that says, hey, I'm going to take you out. I mean, he just survived killing 450 people. Odds are he's a smart enough man, he's brave enough that he can figure out this one more thing. But he doesn't find that he's at that place that he can do it. Like, he's just so tired. And that one more threat was all it took to make him just want to give up. And so he goes away a couple of days and he finds himself at the foot of a tree, and he cries out to God like, I'm done and I just can't do it anymore. So the thing that I want us to remember is that there is a safe space for us to be to that place. And you know what? If you're not burnt out right now and you have figured out a way to have appropriate boundaries and all those things, that's awesome and wonderful. But there are people around you, I promise, that are hurting and that find themselves in a time and a space that they need that angel to show up. That messenger. Angel means messenger from God, not a white, billowy figure. So Elijah goes and he cries out to God and he's like, man, I'm done. I'm just done. And then this angel shows up and he gets enough nourishment to help him go and do what he needs. Like, what a beautiful part of the story. He wakes up and there's food. Food comes in lots of different ways. Food comes in friendship. Food comes in time off. Food comes in quiet moments of meditation and worship, whether it's in a physical space or not. Food comes in giving ourselves permission to take a break. Not give up, but just take a break and say, I just can't do one more thing. Food comes to us in our ability to say no respectfully. Food comes to us in our ways to not have to be everything to everyone. What kind of food do you need today? Only you can identify that. Like, only you know what's going to bring you some respite and some peace. And it's time that we give ourselves permission to have that peace. You know, our flame, our passion can also be our biggest enemy. And if we aren't careful, our own flame will burn ourselves out. We are not created to be superhuman, and we're not created to be everything to everyone. And it's okay to say no, and that I can't do this right now. Good things happen in this world when we give ourselves time and space and we rely on the place that carries us in and through and over and under difficult and impossible things. I want to show you a picture now. It is of the original, oldest African Episcopal Methodist church in our nation. It is an AME Zion church, African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. It was founded in the late 1700s. It's in Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, and now you see an image of the founding pastor. His name is Richard Allen. It's such an inspiring story. And, you know, I think the universe, I think God has a way when we're open to speaking to us through things. Like, I don't think God makes us drive a certain way or go a certain place so that things will happen. But I think, like, if we're open to receiving the message from God and food from God, like, we can. So a couple of days ago, we had driven to Philadelphia to see Tom's daughter, Caroline. She's in grad school up there, and we wanted to see her before Thanksgiving, and this was the only weekend that worked out. And so we drove up on Thursday. I flew back yesterday, and it was a long, long day. It's a long way to Philadelphia. We were driving to the hotel that night, and I saw this just majestic front of a building. It was this beautiful stone structure, and I'm a little bit of a church geek. Like, if I see this beautiful structure, I want to know what it is, and maybe is it Methodist? And so as we were driving by, I noticed that the word Methodist was in the title, but not United Methodist. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. On Friday morning, I had some time, so I started Googling what the church was, and I found out it was the oldest African Methodist Episcopal church in the nation. The first one ever founded. It was founded by Richard Allen, who ultimately became Bishop Richard Allen, and he was a slave. His story, I just am fascinated with it. His slave owner was known to be a sympathetic slave owner. Someone that had slaves, it was a part of their culture, but not someone who treated slaves like other stories that we've seen where they are beaten and mistreated. This slave owner, although slavery was certainly not easy, and Richard Allen says it was just a plot in his life that he wished he did not have to live, but his slave owner was kind. And so his slave owner let him go to church. And so he went, and it was called a Methodist society. That's what Methodist churches started out as back in the 1700s. I mean, keep in mind, like, this is like when our nation was being formed. So this is a long time ago. And back then, in this place, they actually worshiped in these societies together. The slaves would worship with their owners. And this owner let Richard worship with him. And he did in this Methodist society. And he heard about this God of love and God of peace, and a God that supports us and sustains us through all things. And he said, I felt like I had been released from a dungeon, and these chains that are binding me, I feel like I've been set free. A Savior, there was someone that loved me enough that they sacrificed all for me. And so Allen left that worship service and then committed himself to being the best slave that he could possibly be. Like, he worked harder and did all these things more than he'd ever done before. And so his owner was like, wow, like, Christianity really does benefit slaves. Lots of other slave owners back then would prohibit their slaves from going to church. They felt like Christianity was useless for them. So sad and tragic. Because like this Richard Allen, like, he fell in love with God and committed his life to being the best person that he could be. And then there was this movement to abolish slavery, and his owner got involved in that movement. The Methodist Church actually were leaders, or was a leader in that movement. And so Richard Allen earned enough money to buy his freedom. Now, this is a man who had been separated from his mother on 2 different instances. And the second instance, when his mother was bought again, they took 3 of his siblings and only left him with 2 others. So he grew up as a young boy alone. No one knows what happened to his father, but he was bought as well. But this Richard Allen, like, he didn't give up. There wasn't one more straw that made him go and sit underneath a tree and say, I am done. Clearly, something in him gave him what he needed to keep going. So much so that he founded the oldest African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in our nation. And that church still functions today. I really thought Thursday night it would be a dead church. It would be a church where there's only 10 people, or it would be a church that was just a historic landmark. It is a historic landmark, a national historic landmark, and it is a museum, and you can go for certain hours every day. But guess what? Like right now, they're worshiping online and in person, and their website shows vibrant ministries. That's a history of resilience, and that's a history of not being burned out. It's important that we don't get burned out. My angels were the PAC team, the Pastor's Advisory Council, that stood in that commons area that day and said, we know you're tired. How could you not be? Take some time immediately. I'm like, now is not a good time for me to take time off. Like, fall is our best time because people are interested in getting back involved. I said, I can't do that now. And they said, well, you have to do it at the beginning of the year. And so I did. The interesting thing is that little did I know, right, like that all my life events would happen. But in January, my father fell terminally ill. They found a tumor in his brain, and he went into the hospital and spent about a month there, and then to assisted living, and then died just a few weeks later. My marriage ended. I was shocked by that. My children, I was an empty nester. Like, I was just trying to find my way on my sabbatical. My dad died. My marriage ended on my sabbatical. And I was supposed to come back in like with all this energy and passion, and I think I did for a little while. And then I'm like, I'm struggling. I'm just tired. And you know what? Apparently you don't like just bounce back from burnout. We're going to talk about how to do that the third week in the series. But, you know, I've learned some boundaries. I've learned that I don't have to answer every email and every text immediately. And I feel guilty for doing that. Like, I feel so bad, and I wrestle with my thoughts at the end of the day, like I should have called so-and-so, I should have sent a text to so-and-so. But just in my work and yours too, it's never done. There's always more. But we're not superhuman. Elijah, one of the most brave and courageous men ever, couldn't get it all done. And guess what? We don't have to either. I'll never forget telling my therapist that I just was so sad that I had disappointed a family and they were upset with me. And he said, well, why are they upset? And I said, well, they texted me on a Friday night, and we had actually gone out of town with some friends, and they told me about a medical diagnosis that their spouse had received like 3 or 4 months ago. And it was not a terminal diagnosis, but they were just sad. And I mean, I certainly empathized with them and felt bad and wrote it in my to-do list that I needed to call them on Monday when I got back to the office. But it was 10:30 on a Friday night, and I didn't text them back. On Monday, when I did write them back, they said, I thought you didn't care. And that's like a knife in the gut for us, right? Like, we always want people to know that we care. And so when I went to therapy the next day, I told my therapist that, and he said, even Jesus went away to rest. I said, well, I'm not Jesus. And he said, I'm aware. And he said, but don't you think if Jesus rested that you have to too? We're never going to feel like we've got it all figured out. And for some of us, we're never going to feel like we're enough, like we do enough as a parent or a friend or a spouse or an employee. But if we aren't careful, fatigue and fear and frustration will cause us and render us useless. When God spoke to Elijah, he said, there's so much more for you to do. You have a long journey ahead of you. You need nourishment and you need to rest. This week, I want you to catch yourself saying, I'm fine. And think, am I really? What food do I need? What nourishment do I need? So that this is not a sprint, but it's a marathon. And we want to finish our race and finish it well. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, on this day that we celebrate the birth of this church and this organization, and on this day as we remember that everything changed on 9/11 when folks that allowed themselves to be driven by evil took the lives of so many people. We are cognizant that our world is always changing, and that constant change and uncertainty can cause us to be fatigued and afraid and frustrated. Yet we know that there's a power that lives in us that is you. And if we will find our ways to tap into that power and that strength, you do support us and carry us in and through all things. Thank you for being a God that allows us to have grit, resilience, perseverance, and to be able to conquer burnout. We offer ourselves to you in Christ's name. Amen. So I want to introduce you to something. We are getting ready for our new faith subscription box. We decided that we were going to do these different this year. Last year, we had you sign up for them, and then we just sent them out periodically. This time, we're going to do them in time for every box. And we're going to ask for a $10 donation to cover the postage. We just aren't a big enough organization that we can spend a couple of $1,000s every several months to cover postage. So if you want the box, we're just asking for $10. Tomorrow, we'll send out an email. We'll send out a text link, and the boxes are different now. They're not just junk stuff in there that you feel guilty about if you throw it away. Each box will have one mindful item. Because some of us are visual and tangible people, and we need to put our hands on something. And so this month in our box, you get your very own soul creation created candle. And on it is our logo for the series, the little skeleton guy with the hole in his head saying, "I'm fine." You'll get meditation questions, you'll get your quote cards, and we invite you to burn your candle, especially when you're feeling weary and burned out. And when you do, remember that there is a light that shines within each of us, and that light is God. And that light carries us even in the times of fatigue and fear and frustration and burnout. So watch for that email and that text tomorrow. And next Sunday, I will be live streaming with you from Kagumba, Uganda, with our Ugandan campus. I can't wait to be with you in worship next Sunday. It's going to be a powerful experience, and I can't wait for you to meet them. So I really look forward to worshiping with you next week. Go in peace.
Walking around these walls, I thought by now they'd fall, but you have never failed me yet. Waiting for change to come, knowing the battle's won, for you have never failed me yet. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. I know the night won't last, your word has come to pass. My heart will sing your praise again. Jesus, you're still enough. Keep me within your love. My heart will sing your praise again. Your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands, this is my confidence. You've never failed, your promise still stands, great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed. Your promise still stands. Great is your faithfulness, faithfulness. I'm still in your hands. This is my confidence. You've never failed me yet. You've never failed me yet. I never will forget. You've never failed me yet. I never will forget.
Hey, Amped Kids! Lane here, and I am super excited that you guys are tuning in for another episode of Amped. I hope you guys got your boxes in the mail or at front door delivery, and if you haven't gotten them yet, I promise they're on the way, okay? In your boxes, there's all the supplies for all the segments for the 2 episodes this month, so make sure you have your boxes next to you while you watch these episodes, okay? This month is all about trust. And I don't know about you guys, but I really struggle with trusting people. So I'm really excited to learn how important it is to trust people and the simple things I can do to start learning that trust through other people, okay? I'm excited to follow along this episode with you, and I'll see you guys at the end.
Hi, Amped! Remember a few episodes ago when we were at Lane's house? Well, now we're at my house. Today, we're gonna make the coolest craft so far, I think. From your box, you're gonna need the piece of paper, an amped cup, and watercolor paint. Let's get started. Now, what we're gonna do first is take out the paintbrush from the watercolor set. We need to make a few water droplets on the piece of paper, so we're gonna take our brush, dip it into your cup of water, and then let it make some water droplets onto the cardstock paper. They can be big, small, they can be in a design, they can be random, however you want to do them. Okay, here's what mine look like so far. Next, we're going to color all of these water droplets. How are we going to color the water droplets? We're going to take our brush again, dip it in any color you like, and you can do multiple colors, but just one at a time. So I think my favorite color is orange. I want to start with orange. So with a little water on my paintbrush, I'm swirling the paintbrush into the orange color, just like this. Now, I'm going to take the orange and I'm going to place it on one of my dots. Let's see what happens. Oh my gosh. That's so cool, you guys. Look at that orange dot. Wow, that is so awesome. Let me scoot this closer so you can see some more. Now let's do another color. How about blue? This is the light blue. Let's do this one right up front. Oh my goodness, it works. So, you know how when we first started, you were probably really confused on what we were gonna do? That's because we needed to trust the process. So many things in life require us to trust. trust other people, trust the process, just trust in general. Today, when we sat down to do this craft, I wasn't sure if it was even gonna work. I didn't know what colors I was gonna choose. I didn't know how big I wanted my droplets to be, but we sat here together and we trusted that we knew that it was gonna work and that it was gonna be fun. And guess what? It was. Trust makes everything sweeter, even if it's not the outcome that you want. It's nice to have friends that you trust, to have family that you trust, and to trust yourself. I'm so excited to see what you guys put on your water droplets. Send us a picture to the number below on the screen because we'd love to see them and maybe share them on our AMP social media accounts. That's it for today, guys. We'll see you next time.
So, what is trust? Trust is an important part of all relationships and friendships. Someone once said that trust is the easiest thing in the world to lose and the hardest thing in the world to get back. Trust is a belief that a person will behave in a certain way. Trust involves believing that someone is dependable and won't let you down. Trust is a feeling of confidence and security. Importantly, to trust someone, you need to feel good about them. Let's look at a scenario. Emily told Delonte a secret and told him not to tell anyone. Delonte said, "Don't worry, you can trust me." Reflection questions. What does trust mean to you? Can you name at least one person who you trust and why? What might happen if Delonte told Emily's secret? What does it take for you to trust someone?
Whoa! Who knew that stuff about trust? It's such a simple thing that you can do that's so important, you know? Trusting your friends to help you with something, trusting your parents, everything like that is super important. And I don't know about you guys, but I was not trusting that process with Lexi doing the craft, but it turned out to be so beautiful and so amazing. So sometimes trust takes a little bit of time, so you just have to be patient, okay? We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye!
Follow us on Instagram at Amped Online to stay up to date on the latest news, air dates, and extra content. Check out our webpage at ampedwestchurch.com to watch full episodes, segments, get more information about upcoming events, and more. Also, text AMPED to 704-343-8955 to sign up for your free AMPED subscription box.